Hey everybody, welcome to First Baptist Waynesboro. Turn quickly into First Baptist Studios, where we are trying to do our best to provide you with a worship experience every single week as we continue down this uncharted path. So we know that things are in flux, that things are changing, but we hope to be a consistent voice of a consistent, uplifting voice in a time of uncertainty. So if you have been following us, if you follow us on social media, that's the best way to stay up to date with what we're doing. We're putting out videos throughout the week of Janice, myself, Pastor Barrett. We're all, and soon some music, which you will see in today's service. We also are continuing soundings. We're going to send mail with updates where we stand. And the best way, other than social media right now, to stay up to date with us is through our e-newsletter. If you do not receive emails from First Baptist Waynesboro and you would like to, the best way to do that is to contact our church office, which is still open, and we will put you on the e-newsletter list. Obviously, we're still trying to figure out what church looks like in the midst of this, but we do know that the church can be supportive in all of this. If you are in need of assistance, please contact us. If you need someone to get you groceries, if you need financial assistance, please contact the church office. We are here to help you. The church is here for times like these. This also means, though, if you are fortunate and you are able to keep your income steady the way you typically would, we need you to give. Giving is still important during this time as we mobilize the church to stand up for those and to protect those who may not be so fortunate. Obviously, community looks very different in a time like this. And we are fortunate enough to have technology so that we can still join together. If you're a Sunday school teacher and you want to join with your Sunday school class, there are ways to do that. You can either use Zoom or Skype or Google Hangout, and we're willing to help you work through those things to be together during this crucial time. So for today's worship service, things are going to look actually kind of normal. We're going to have some music, a children's sermon, and a sermon. And the only difference is you can watch them in your pajamas. So the Lord be with you this morning.
Alas, and did my Savior bleed, and did my sovereign die? Would he devote that sacred head for sinners such as I? Was it for crimes that I had done he groaned upon the tree? Amazing pity, grace unknown, and love beyond degree. Well might the sun in darkness hide and shut his glories in, when Christ the mighty Maker died for man, the creature's sin. But drops of grief can ne'er repay the debt of love I owe. Here, Lord, I give myself away, is all that I can do, is all that I can do.
Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about something that a lot of you have already been talking about at school or at home, and that is germs. And germs are something that can make us sick, and we've been talking about it because there's a virus going around. And that virus is a virus that really needs our attention, and we've got to work hard to get rid of it. So germs sometimes are drawn with pictures with silly faces in books and in cartoons, but they're not silly at all. Real germs do have a lot of different shapes, but we can't see them with our eyes. We can't even see them with magnifying glasses. Scientists and doctors have to see them with microscopes. But just because we can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. How do we get rid of them? Well, one way is to wash our hands with soap and water. And we've got to wash our hands for at least 20 to 30 seconds every time we do it, and then dry our hands afterwards. And hopefully, if you wash for long enough with soap and water, those germs will come right off your hand, go right down the drain, and leave you alone, and they won't make you sick or make someone else sick if you were to touch them. And we're going to do a little experiment, and you can do this at home too. So we're going to have a bowl. It's a white bowl so that you can see something inside. We're going to pour plain, clean water into our bowl, and then we're going to pretend that this pepper is germy, and all the pepper flakes are germs. And they're not really germs because we eat pepper, but this is just so you can see them. So we'll put the pepper right on top of that water. Now, if I were just to put my finger in this water with these germs and pull it out, I'm still going to have germs all over my hands. The water didn't wash those germs away. But I want you to watch what happens when we add soap to that water. Watch where those germs go. And just like that, if you wash with soap and water, the germs will come off of your hands too. It's pretty easy if we all do our job. So we did an experiment about germs, and we saw how soap and water together really make a difference. Now, when you're washing your hands, make sure that you wash for 20 to 30 seconds, which means you can sing the ABC song, not too fast, or you can sing Happy Birthday twice. And there's another song you can sing, because I timed it. Jesus Loves Me. It's about the perfect length to wash our hands with soap and water, and then don't forget to dry them. So remember, if you have germs on your hands, and I'm going to pretend these dots all over are germs. If you just use water, nothing's going to happen. You've got to add that soap. Make sure you use soap and water, and wash your hands and sing one of those songs. And then, when you're done, guess what? Those germs will all be gone off of your hands, and you'll be safe, and you'll make everybody safe all around you. So use that soap and water. We'll get rid of these germs, and everybody will stay healthy.
He was wounded for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and with his wounds, and with his wounds, and with his wounds, we are healed. He was despised, he was rejected, one from whom men hid their faces. Man of sorrows, with grief acquainted, we esteemed him not. For we like sheep have gone astray, each of us turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him all
It's been a gut-punching week for us, for Virginia, for America. The whirlwind of feelings, the constant breaking news of outbreaks, new projections of the spread of the coronavirus. Every day we see massive increases in cases in America alone. Europe's death toll is now past China's. Every day leaves us relitigating our fears of the unknown. We all have so many questions, so many scenarios. The worry of what we do with our kids. What about the kindergartners who need 7 more weeks of school to learn to read and do math? Will they ever go back to school? Will they get to say goodbye to their kindergarten teacher? Will they be thrust into first grade already behind? What about the 12-year-old tasked with taking care of his 6-year-old sister? He's cooking meals, washing clothes. They both live with their grandmother and she has to be at work. What about the kids who don't need to be home with their guardian for fear of neglect or abuse? What about the small business owners? What about that weekly sacred rhythm of church? When will we gather again? What about prom for senior graduates? What about college acceptance? What about those final games of sports of kids who've been playing together their whole lives? What about the double income family that works hard, but now one parent has to stay home each day because they don't have consistent child care? Both parents are working less, both parents bring in less. What about their mortgages or their rent? What about the senior adults who live alone and have come accustomed to spending their free time during the day at the senior center with their friends? How do they survive this? How do we remain calm or at least steady in the midst of all of this? One of the 27,000 news pieces I've read over the last week said that the people most affected by social distancing is working moms. They get behind at work, they get behind at home, they're taking the mental load of family, kids, parenting, teaching, cooking, shopping, and now managing house and work in the midst of a pandemic. I mean, half are working from home and half are parenting, and it's terribly hard, especially managing the anxieties in the house. Now, the truth is, we are all like working moms. We're all affected by COVID-19. We're all experiencing the trauma of our homeostasis being torn apart. And let's be honest, normalcy might not come for a while. So what do we do? Practically speaking, there's things we can do as well as practice, like social distancing. By the way, social distancing is not silly. America is at a critical moment. Health professionals are telling us we are just about to hit a tipping point. The coronavirus is serious. It might seem foolish, but we have to be okay with seeming foolish. That's how we know it works. Now, you can read and listen to more about what we can do practically elsewhere. We're going to keep updating you. Pastor Nate and Janice are doing a fantastic job of keeping us updated on social media. But today, as your pastor, I want to address an angle of all of this mess, that if we're not careful, it can trigger us further into trauma. The trauma I'm talking about is shame. Shame is that negative self-talk, that mind chatter you can't turn off. It's why the working mom is struggling so much right now. Shame feeds that mind chatter to speak louder and faster, reminding us that we're definitely as bad as we think we are. Shame might just be the number one trigger that sends our faith spiraling out of control into a spiritual trauma. I think this is true for Paul. We're going to read through his words in a minute from Romans 7, and I really want you to listen to how ashamed he is. Before I read it though, I want to say this. During this fear-increasing phase of the coronavirus, we really have to watch out for what's happening in our minds. I call this mind chatter. Psychiatrists call it self-actualizing. We have to monitor, really monitor our mental moments. Depression can sneak up on all of us and lead us into cycles of unhealthiness, which can lead us down to paths of old habits, which can lead to harmful coping mechanisms that can throw our lives into further darkness. I think this just might be what Paul's wrestling with in Romans 7. So let's start in verse 15. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Do you see Paul spiraling here? This is why we need to be aware of our mind chatter. We've been home, social distancing for days now. We have 7,000 things that we need to get done around the house and in our life, but instead of focusing on those things, we do the things that don't matter. We do the very things that we even hate. And Paul is starting to go somewhere dark here. He's starting to go down the path of descent. Now, which we're arguing this Lent, we all want to go down, but we can't go down it blind. We have to self-actualize. We have to realize the darkness that we are in, otherwise the darkness will take over our minds. And that's scary. So let's see what Paul does in verse 16. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. But in fact, it is no longer that I do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. Now that's even darker. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. I can know the right answer, but I can't live it out. I wonder what Paul is really wrestling with here. Now, he mentions in chapter 7 the word law 19 different times. And to me, clearly, Paul has this competitive drive to see that the law is good and we need to follow it. But he's also realizing deep down he can't. His instincts pull him in different directions. I know that nothing good dwells within me. This is just about as dark as it gets. Do you hear the mind chatter? I know nothing good dwells within this wretched body. I want to say this very clearly. Paul is wrong here. He's not telling the truth. He's telling his truth, which in this moment is all he can see. But the real truth from God is something very good dwells within him, just like it does you and me. But Paul can't see it. He's no longer traveling down the path of descent. He's now stuck. He is camped out and rooted in the dark. And when this happens, depression sets in. Verse 19, for I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Listen to the shame he's carrying. This is the danger of letting our mind chatter take off without self-actualizing. Now, my mom would say this, all of that is for the birds. And what she means is, mind chatter isn't helpful for anyone. You can't just sit in this. It will destroy your faith in God. You have to move past it. And luckily, Paul doesn't just sit there. Verse 20. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. Okay, granted, Paul's saying he's being led by sin, but at least he's going somewhere and he's not stuck in this unmovable, depressing shame. So let's see where he goes. Verse 21. So I find it to be law that what I want to do, what is good, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inmost self, but I see in my members another law at war with the law of my mind, making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Okay, Paul's doing his verbose, wordy, law dualism thing again. He does it a lot. He likes this, but read it slowly. I think we can draw some things here. Paul wants to do what's good. He's got an idea that there is something good. Maybe not everything in him is bad after all, but he doesn't know the way there. He starts down the path of descent, but now, thanks to his shame, he's been camped out and stuck in a depressive state. But slowly, he's acknowledging he needs to keep going. He can't stay where he is. That's not healthy, and he knows it. This is a positive step. Just too bad it's in the wrong direction. Paul thinks that which will move him onward is the law. Look at verse 22. For I delight in the law of God in my inmost self. But I see in my members another law at war with the law of my mind, making me captive to the law of sin that dwells with my members. He thinks law will pull him out of this state, back out of the path of descent, as if the direction that he was going was originally bad, that the law will pull him out. He admits this. Verse 24, wretched man that I am, who will rescue me from this body of death? He wants out of the path of descent. We mention this every week. When we go down the path of descent, we are going to enter into our sin. We will experience pain. It's natural to want out of this, but the way out is not to go back, not to ascend. The way out is to keep going through your suffering, through your pain. It opens us up to grace and to God. Now, hopefully, Paul will learn this, but as of right now, he's not ready to see it yet. Verse 25. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then my mind and I am slave to the law of God, but my flesh I am slave to the law of sin. Unfortunately, this is where we leave Paul for today. He's on the journey down the path of descent, and he is stuck in this inner conflict. He was thrust into darkness, and now he's stuck. He could stay there and become depressed in sin, which is the worst option. Luckily, he knows he doesn't want to do this. He could try and use the law and climb back out of this darkness. That's not the best option, but it is the path of least resistance. In my experience, most people, most often, choose this path. To our detriment, we let our mind chatter tell us we should be ashamed for ever going into the darkness. But what I hope you're learning is the only truly spiritual way forward is down, further into the darkness of our inner lives, further down the path of descent, further into our souls. It seems backwards, but the only way to truly get out is to go further in. I like to think of it like this. The path of descent is like moving from your mind down to your soul, stopping the mind chatter telling you what you should be ashamed of and letting your soul tell you what you're worth. If we can do this, which I'm going to say more about how we can in next week's sermon, then we'll come to accept one of the deepest truths in all of life and one that the mind cannot comprehend. We are spiritual beings incarnating a body. We're not a body occasionally inhabiting a spirit. Your mind will tell you it's the opposite. But when you descend from the mind to the soul and take the path of descent, you'll realize the mind's wrong and that your soul is right. And you'll finally be ready to understand why God's so willing to offer beauty for ashes.